Dylan Matthews stood at the window of his small office, watching the Seattle rain trace patterns on the glass. The email that would change everything sat open on his laptop, its congratulatory message almost too good to believe, $1 million innovation grant recipient. His hands were still shaking. 10 years of grinding, of sleeping on couches and living on ramen noodles, had led to this moment. His software company, originally started in his garage, had finally gotten its big break. The grant would fund the development of his revolutionary AI-driven healthcare monitoring system, potentially saving countless lives. His first instinct was to call Josh, his older brother and longtime confidant. Josh had always been there, through the late-night coding sessions, the failed pitches, even that disastrous first investor meeting where Dylan had practically forgotten his own name. But something felt off when he dialed Josh's number. "Hey, I got the grant," Dylan said, his excitement bubbling over. "Can you believe it?" The pause on the other end lasted a fraction too long. That's great, Dylan." Josh's voice was flat, missing its usual warmth. "Congratulations." Dylan's smile faltered. "Everything okay? I thought you'd be more excited. You've been part of this journey from day one." "Look, I've got a meeting. We'll talk later, okay?" The line went dead before Dylan could respond. The celebration dinner that evening at Seattle's finest restaurant felt hollow without Josh there. Dylan's other team members raised their glasses, their faces glowing with possibility, but his eyes kept drifting to the empty chair he'd reserved for his brother. Later that night, as Dylan was reviewing the grant documentation, an email from Sarah Chen, one of the grant committee members, caught his attention. It was a routine congratulatory message, but one line stood out: "Despite the split decision, your innovation and vision won the day." Split decision. Dylan's fingers flew across the keyboard, diving deeper into the grant portal. There it was, buried in the voting records: 6 votes in favor, 1 against. The dissenting vote stood out like an accusation: Joshua Matthews. Dylan's world tilted on its axis. His own brother, the person he trusted most, had voted against his dream. The same brother who had helped him debug code at 3 a.m., who had lent him startup money when their parents said the idea was too risky, who had always been his biggest supporter, or so he thought. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows like angry fingers. Dylan's phone buzzed with another text from Josh: "Can we meet tomorrow? We need to talk." Dylan stared at the message, his throat tight with betrayal. The grant documents on his screen blurred as memories flooded back: Josh helping him with his first computer at age 12, teaching him to code, celebrating his first successful app launch. Had it all been an act? He typed and deleted several responses before settling on 2 words: "Your office." As he set his phone down, Dylan noticed his hands were shaking again, but for entirely different reasons. Tomorrow, he would face his brother and demand answers. Tomorrow, he would learn if everything he believed about their relationship had been a lie. The Seattle skyline disappeared behind sheets of rain, leaving Dylan alone with the growing storm of questions in his mind. His triumph had transformed into something darker, more complex. And somewhere in the city, his brother was preparing for a conversation that would either heal their bond or shatter it beyond repair. The grant money no longer felt like a victory. It felt like a price tag on their brotherhood. The morning brought no clarity, only the dull ache of betrayal that had settled in Dylan's chest like lead. Josh's office at the Seattle Technology Center stood as a testament to his own success, the corner suite with its sweeping views of Elliott Bay, walls lined with industry awards and recognition. Dylan had always felt proud walking into this space. Now, each step felt like treading on broken glass. Josh was waiting, his usual confident posture replaced by something more guarded. The morning light caught the silver threading through his dark hair. When had his brother started going gray? How many other changes had Dylan missed while chasing his dreams? "I guess we should talk about the grant," Josh said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken words. Dylan's carefully prepared speech evaporated. Talk about how you tried to kill it. How you voted against your own brother. It's not that simple, Dylan. Josh's fingers drummed against his desk, a nervous habit from childhood that Dylan hadn't seen in years. The grant committee isn't about family loyalty. It's about backing projects that will succeed. The words hit like physical blows. And you don't think I can succeed? After everything we've built together? That's exactly the problem. Josh stood, pacing to the window. We haven't built anything together, not really. You've been so focused on your vision, your dream, that you never stopped to consider whether it was actually viable. Do you know how many healthcare startups fail in their first year? How many regulation hurdles you'll face? Dylan's laugh came out harsh. So this is about protecting me? Keeping me from failing? It's about being honest. Josh turned, his composure cracking. Something nobody else in your life seems willing to do. You've surrounded yourself with yes men who are afraid to tell you the truth. Your AI implementation is flawed. Your market research is incomplete. But everyone's so caught up in the Dylan Matthews success story that they can't see it. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and irretrievable. Dylan felt something shift inside him, like tectonic plates grinding against each other. Success story. His voice was dangerously quiet. You think this has been some kind of fairy tale? While you were getting your corner office and industry awards, I was sleeping on floors, debugging code until my eyes bled, building something that could actually help people. Help people. Josh's laugh was bitter. You've been helping yourself, Dylan. To my connections, my expertise, my reputation. Every time you needed a door opened, who did you call? Every time you needed technical advice, who stayed up late walking you through it? And now you're mad because for once, just once, I didn't smooth the path for you. The accusation struck deeper than Dylan expected. Memories flooded back, Josh recommending him to key clients, Josh reviewing his code, Josh making introductions at industry events. Had he taken it all for granted? I never asked you to be my caretaker, Dylan said, but the words felt hollow. No, you just expected it. Josh's voice softened, somehow making it worse. You're my little brother, Dylan. Of course I helped. But at some point, you need to stand on your own feet. And this grant, this project, it's not ready. You're not ready. Dylan moved to the door, his hand gripping the handle until his knuckles went white. You're wrong. About the project, about me, about everything. And I'm going to prove it. Dylan. You know what the worst part is? Dylan turned back, meeting his brother's eyes. I actually believed in us. Team Matthews, taking on the world together. What a joke. As he walked out, Dylan's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had leaked the grant voting records to a tech industry blog. The headline made his blood run cold, Family Feud at Innovation Grant, Brother Votes Against Brother. The story was already spreading through Seattle's tight-knit tech community. By tomorrow, everyone would know. The triumph of winning the grant was morphing into something else entirely, a public spectacle of family betrayal. In the elevator, Dylan caught his reflection in the polished doors. His father's words from years ago echoed in his mind, success has a way of showing you who people really are. He hadn't understood then. He did now. His phone buzzed again. The tech blog had updated their story with a quote from an anonymous source claiming the grant decision was influenced by personal connections rather than merit. The implications were clear, someone was suggesting he'd won through nepotism rather than innovation. Dylan's grip tightened on his phone. If Josh wanted him to stand on his own feet, fine. But he was about to learn that the student had surpassed the teacher. The game was changing, and Dylan wasn't playing by anyone else's rules anymore. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and with them, a new chapter in the Matthews brothers' story began, one that would test not just their relationship, but everything they thought they knew about success, loyalty, and the true cost of ambition. The accusation spread through Seattle's tech community like wildfire, each whispered conversation and sidelong glance cutting deeper than Dylan had expected. But it wasn't the public scrutiny that kept him awake at night, it was the quiet moments when Josh's words would replay in his mind, each syllable carrying the weight of unwanted truth. In his downtown apartment, surrounded by whiteboards covered in code and project plans, Dylan found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, questioning everything. The rain-streaked windows reflected his image, fragmented and distorted, much like his understanding of the past decade. He pulled out his old project notebooks, spreading them across his desk. Each page held Josh's handwriting in the margins, suggestions, corrections, improvements. Had he really been so blind to his own dependence? "You've surrounded yourself with yes men," Josh had said. The words stung because they carried a kernel of truth. Dylan started reviewing his team meetings from the past months, seeing them through new eyes. How many times had he dismissed concerns about regulatory challenges? How often had he pushed ahead without fully addressing the technical debt in his codebase? Sarah Chen, the grant committee member who had first tipped him off about the split vote, called unexpectedly. "Dylan, I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she said, her voice careful. "I've been watching the coverage, and I want you to know, the committee stood by its decision because your vision has merit. But maybe your brother's concerns deserve consideration too." Dylan sat with that thought, rolling it around like a stone in his palm. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because great ideas fail every day," she replied. "Not because they're bad ideas, but because their creators couldn't separate criticism from rejection. Your brother's vote wasn't about loyalty, it was about responsibility." After the call, Dylan found himself at his old neighborhood coffee shop, where he and Josh used to spend countless hours coding and dreaming. The barista still remembered their usual orders. He ordered both, letting Josh's go cold at the empty seat across from him. Opening his laptop, Dylan began a systematic review of his project. Not with defensive pride or wounded ego, but with the clinical precision Josh had tried to teach him years ago. Hours passed as he dug deeper, past the surface-level polish of his pitch deck and into the core assumptions of his business model. The sun was setting when he finally sat back, running his hands through his hair. Josh had been right about the regulatory blind spots. About the technical shortcuts. About the market research gaps. But he had been wrong about something crucial. Dylan wasn't just riding on his brother's coattails. The foundation was solid, even if the execution needed work. His phone buzzed with another industry blog notification. Matthews Brothers Rift raises questions about innovation grant integrity. The comments section was already filling with speculation and judgment. But for the first time since the storm broke, Dylan felt oddly calm. He opened his project management software and began creating new task lists. Not to prove Josh wrong, but to address the legitimate concerns hidden beneath the painful delivery. Each item became a step on a path forward, one that would require humility, dedication, and a kind of independence he'd never truly embraced before. As night fell over Seattle, Dylan wrote an email to his team calling for an emergency meeting. They needed to hear something that neither Josh's criticism nor his own defensive pride had fully acknowledged. The truth lay somewhere in between, in the complex space where family loyalty met professional integrity. The reply all started coming in immediately, his team rallying around him. But this time, Dylan wasn't looking for validation. He was looking for honest critique, for the hard questions he'd been avoiding. It was time to build something that could stand on its own merits, not just as Josh Matthews' little brother's project, but as a genuine innovation that could change lives. His phone buzzed again. Another comment on the blog post, this time from an anonymous insider claiming to have damaging information about the grant selection process. The stakes were rising, threatening not just his relationship with Josh, but the very foundation of his dream. Dylan closed his laptop, the coffee shop now empty except for him and his thoughts. On the window, their old initials were still scratched into the corner of the table, JNDM, Future Tech Giants. The memory should have hurt, but instead, it sparked something else: determination. He'd spent years trying to live up to Josh's example. Now it was time to write his own story. The question was, could he do it without destroying what remained of their brotherhood in the process? As he gathered his things to leave, Dylan noticed Josh's cold coffee still sitting across the table. Some metaphors wrote themselves. Tomorrow, he would begin the real work, not of proving himself to others, but of becoming the kind of innovator who could face criticism without crumbling, who could separate personal wounds from professional growth. The rain had stopped, leaving the Seattle streets glistening under streetlights. Somewhere in this city, Josh was probably still at his office, carrying his own version of their shared burden. Dylan wondered if his brother was also realizing that sometimes the hardest truths come from those who know us best, and that learning to hear them might be the greatest innovation of all. The accusations hit Josh's desk on a quiet Wednesday morning. Anonymous emails sent to every major tech publication in Seattle, evidence suggesting the Matthews brothers had orchestrated the entire grant controversy for publicity. Doctored communications, manipulated timestamps, a carefully constructed narrative of family betrayal designed to generate buzz for Dylan's startup. None of it was true, but truth rarely matters when scandal tastes sweeter. Josh sat in his darkened office, watching Seattle's tech district come alive with the dawn. The weight of decades of brotherhood pressed against his chest like a stone. Every decision, every moment of guidance, every late-night debugging session had led them here, to this precipice where professional integrity and family loyalty fought their silent war. His phone buzzed with a message from Dylan: "We need to talk. Not as brothers. Not as competitors. Just as two people trying to save everything we've built." The message sat unanswered as Josh reviewed the mounting evidence against them. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to paint their conflict as manufactured drama. But why? The answer nagged at the edges of his consciousness, a shadow he couldn't quite grasp. Across town, Dylan faced his own crisis. The grant committee had called an emergency meeting to review their decision. The anonymous allegations had done their work, casting doubt on every aspect of his victory. But as he prepared his defense, Dylan realized something that changed everything. The evidence included details only someone intimate with both brothers' lives could know. The revelation struck him like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the grant anymore. Someone was using their family's fracture as a weapon, turning their private pain into public theater. In his apartment, surrounded by the remnants of sleepless nights spent reviewing code and regulations, Dylan found himself staring at an old photo. He and Josh at their first tech conference, barely out of their teens, grinning with the unshakable confidence of those who hadn't yet learned how complex success could be. "Remember when it was simple?" he typed to Josh, attaching the photo. "Before we let the world tell us who we were supposed to be." The response came faster than he expected: "It was never simple. We just didn't know better." The truth of those words settled into Dylan's bones. Every step of his journey had been shaped by Josh's influence, not just through direct help, but through the complex dance of admiration, competition, and unspoken expectations that defined their relationship. As the sun climbed higher over Seattle, both brothers faced the same realization: their public feud had created an opportunity for someone to destroy everything they'd built. The question wasn't just about saving their reputations or the grant, it was about understanding why they'd let professional ambition corrupt something as fundamental as brotherhood. Josh finally broke the silence between them: "Meet me at Dad's old garage." Where it all started. The garage where they'd built their first computer together, where Dylan had written his first lines of code under Josh's guidance, where the seeds of their current conflict had been planted in moments of shared dreams and unspoken competition. Dylan's response was immediate: "On my way." But as they converged on that place of beginnings, neither brother knew that their mysterious antagonist had already set the next phase of destruction in motion. The morning's tech blogs were about to explode with new revelations, ones that would test not just their professional reputations, but the very foundation of their relationship. In the quiet of his car, Dylan found himself returning to Josh's words from their confrontation: success has a way of showing you who people really are. Perhaps the real question wasn't about who they were, but about who they would choose to become in the face of this crisis. The garage came into view, its weathered door a testament to time past. Inside, the ghosts of their shared history waited, along with truths neither brother was sure they were ready to face. But as Dylan parked beside Josh's car, he realized something profound. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought against external enemies, but against the versions of ourselves we've built to please others. The garage door creaked open, revealing Josh's silhouette. In his hand was an old notebook, their first business plan, written in teenage scrawl, full of impossible dreams and unconditional faith in each other. The time had come to reconcile who they'd been with who they'd become, and decide if brotherhood was stronger than the wounds they'd inflicted in the name of success. The garage still smelled of motor oil and possibility. Dust motes danced in the shafts of morning light that pierced the weathered windows, illuminating workbenches where two brothers had once built dreams from spare parts and determination. Josh stood by their old desk, the notebook open in his hands, while Dylan lingered in the doorway, caught between past and present. "Remember this?" Josh's voice was soft as he read from the yellowed pages. Matthews Brothers Technologies, changing the world one line of code at a time. We were so sure of everything back then. Dylan moved closer, drawn by the familiar handwriting, his wild scrawl next to Josh's precise letters. We were kids who thought we could solve any problem if we just stayed up late enough. Maybe that was our first mistake, Josh said, turning a page. Thinking every problem had a clean solution, like debugging code. Real life isn't that simple. The silence between them filled with unspoken memories, midnight debugging sessions, shared victories, the gradual drift as success pulled them in different directions. Dylan ran his hand along the old workbench, feeling the grooves and scratches that told their story. "I found something else," Josh said, pulling out a folder. "Remember that summer when you almost quit? After your first major project failed?" Dylan's throat tightened. He tried to forget those dark months when everything seemed impossible. "You wouldn't let me give up." "No, but not for the reasons you think." Josh spread out a series of old emails and documents. "I wasn't just being a supportive brother. I saw something in your work that you couldn't see yet. That's why my vote against the grant hurt so much, because you thought I'd stopped believing in you." The truth hung between them like a physical presence. Dylan picked up one of the papers, an analysis Josh had written years ago about the potential of Dylan's early ideas. Pages of careful consideration, critique, and ultimately, faith in his brother's vision. "I never stopped believing in you, Dylan. I needed you to believe in yourself enough to handle the truth. Even when it hurt." Outside, Seattle's morning traffic created a distant hum, but in the garage, time seemed to stand still. Dylan found himself looking at their relationship through new eyes, seeing not just the support Josh had given, but the careful balance his brother had tried to maintain between nurturing and challenging him. "The person trying to destroy us," Dylan said slowly, "they're counting on our pride keeping us apart. They know our history, Josh. They know exactly where to push." Josh nodded, closing the old notebook. "And they almost succeeded. But they don't understand something fundamental about us." "What's that?" "That sometimes the strongest bridges are built from broken things." Josh turned to face his brother fully. "I was wrong too, Dylan. Not about the technical concerns, but about how I handled them. I forgot that criticism without compassion is just another form of pride." The morning light strengthened, casting their shadows long across the garage floor. Dylan moved to the old whiteboard still mounted on the wall, its surface bearing the ghostly marks of 1,000 erased ideas. "We need to face this together," he said, uncapping a marker. "Not as mentor and student, not as judge and judged, but as equals." As he began to write, laying out what they knew about their anonymous attacker, Dylan felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting, replaced by a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Josh moved to join him, adding his own observations, and for a moment, it was like the intervening years fell away. But they weren't the same starry-eyed kids who had once dreamed in this garage. They were men who had learned the hard way that success and failure were just different faces of the same coin, that true strength often meant admitting weakness, and that sometimes the hardest person to forgive was yourself. "Whoever's behind this," Josh said, studying their growing diagram, "they're going to regret making us remember who we really are." Dylan looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw not the critic who had voted against his grant, but the person who had believed in him enough to tell him hard truths. They don't know what real brothers are capable of. As they worked, the garage became more than a place of memory, it became a forge where something new was being created from the ashes of their conflict. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but they had finally found something more valuable than success: perspective. The sound of incoming emails broke their concentration. The anonymous attacker had made their next move, but this time, the Matthews brothers were ready. They had remembered something essential, that the strongest code isn't the one that never breaks, but the one that knows how to rebuild itself better. The truth, when it finally emerged, was both simpler and more complex than either brother had imagined. The anonymous attacks had come from Marcus Chen, a former colleague who had worked with both brothers at different points in their careers. He had watched their rise from the sidelines, nursing resentments and misinterpreting their success as privilege rather than perseverance. But standing in the conference room of the Seattle Technology Center, facing down the grant committee and the assembled tech press, Dylan realized that Marcus's identity didn't matter nearly as much as the lesson his attacks had taught them. "Success isn't just about innovation," Dylan began, his voice steady as he addressed the room. "It's about understanding that every breakthrough comes with responsibility. My brother taught me that, though it took me years to really hear it." Josh sat in the front row, their old notebook open on his lap. Their morning in the garage had led to more than just uncovering Marcus's identity, it had led them back to themselves, to the core truth that had gotten lost in the pursuit of individual achievement. "The allegations against my brother and me suggested that we manufactured conflict for attention," Dylan continued. "The reality is that we let real conflict blind us to something more important, the difference between supporting someone and helping them grow." The room was silent, dozens of faces focused on this unexpected turn. They had come expecting scandal but found themselves witnessing something rarer, genuine transformation. "My brother voted against my grant," Dylan acknowledged, meeting Josh's eyes. "And he was right to do so. Not because my project wasn't viable, but because he saw what I couldn't, that I needed to face challenges without his protection to truly succeed." Josh stood then, joining his brother at the podium. The gesture wasn't planned, but it felt right, like completing a circuit that had been left open too long. "What my brother hasn't mentioned," Josh added, "is how his journey forced me to confront my own assumptions. I thought wisdom only flowed in one direction. I was wrong." Together, they laid out the truth about Marcus's allegations, but more importantly, they shared the story of two brothers who had lost and found each other in the pursuit of excellence. It wasn't the story the press had come for, but it was the one that needed telling. As they presented their joint vision for moving forward, Dylan's innovation strengthened by Josh's experience, both brothers maintaining their independence while supporting each other's growth, something shifted in the room. The scandal that had threatened to destroy them instead became a testament to resilience and the courage to change. Later that evening, in the quiet of Josh's office, the brothers sat with their shared victory. The grant was secure, Marcus's allegations disproven, but those felt like secondary achievements. "You know what I realized?" Dylan said, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "All those years, I thought I was living in your shadow. But you weren't casting a shadow, you were lighting the way. I just couldn't see it clearly until now." Josh smiled, remembering the eager kid who used to pepper him with questions about coding. "And I thought I had to choose between being your brother and being honest with you. We both had some growing to do." The sun was setting over Elliott Bay, painting the water in shades of gold and promise. On Josh's desk, their old notebook lay open to a fresh page, waiting for new dreams to be written. So, Josh said, picking up a pen. Tell me more about these regulatory challenges you're facing. Not as your big brother, not as a critic, just as someone who believes in what you're building. Dylan pulled up a chair, feeling the weight of past expectations fall away. Actually, I had some ideas about that. But I want your real opinion, no filters, no protection, just truth. As they began to work, their voices mixing with the fading light, both brothers understood that they had found something more valuable than success or vindication. They had rediscovered trust, not the blind faith of childhood, but something stronger, the trust that comes from seeing someone clearly, flaws and all, and choosing to believe in them anyway. The city lights began to twinkle on, each one a reminder that sometimes the best code isn't written in computers but in the careful, conscious choices we make to rewrite our own stories. The Matthews brothers had finally cracked that algorithm, and their best programs were yet to come.